Cats are obligate carnivores. They have no dietary requirement for carbohydrates. And it's really sad and shocking and dismaying that I was listening to a commercial literally yesterday from Purina that says, "We are the world's most favorite kibble, keeping your animal healthy for so long." And it's literally killing our cats.
Welcome to the Pet Care Report podcast by Pet Summits. Here's your natural cat healthcare host, Dr. Meghan Barrett.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Pet Care Report. I'm super excited to be here today with our special guest today, Dr. Marlene Siegel. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Marlene.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me. It's such a wonderful opportunity to speak to more pet parents and veterinarians.
Awesome. So let me introduce our guest. So Dr. Siegel is a fantastic integrated veterinarian who has been practicing for a long time and has a ton of experience. So part of her story is that she was told by equine veterinarians that there were no options to heal her horse, and she set out at that point to prove them wrong. And with nearly 40 years of experience now, she founded her practice, Pasco Veterinary Medical Center, which offers the widest range of alternative therapies and detox services in Florida. As an international speaker and entrepreneur, Dr. Siegel also created EvoLoveRaw.com, a raw pet food and supplement company, and is launching Spa's Family Wellness in 2025. So definitely connect with her at drmarlenesiegel.com and check out all these amazing things she's doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our topic today is surprising health differences between cats and dogs. And I'm really excited to pick your brain about this because you have such an amazing history of, your practice. And I can't wait to see your perspective on this because, as you know, and I know we joked about this before, but they always teach us in vet school that cats are not small dogs. And I think this is something that a lot of us as pet owners and vets have to have a come to Jesus moment about and realize that they are very different creatures and we have to respect those differences.
Absolutely. So let's start with the nutrition side because I think that's where our first dividing factor is. And cats are obligate carnivores. They have no dietary requirement for carbohydrates. And it's really sad and shocking and dismaying that I was listening to a commercial literally yesterday from Purina that says, "We are the world's most favorite kibble, keeping your animal healthy for so long." And it's literally killing our cats. So carbohydrates are the very first thing that is actually causing inflammation, gut damage, and leading to pancreatic disease, diabetes, obesity. All the factors that we're dealing with literally come from what they're eating. And years ago, I'm out there a little longer than you. And years ago, there was this whole epidemic that started happening in cats where they were getting cardiomyopathy. It was a disease of the heart where the heart got large and couldn't beat. And they're going, "Oh my gosh, I don't understand what's going on." So the industry went to the pet food companies and they said, "What's the problem?" Because all of a sudden we're seeing this inundation of cardiomyopathy in cats. Well, they came back and they said, "Oh, we figured out what the problem is. Cats have a higher taurine requirement in their diet than dogs." And in a way, it's true. They do require taurine. But the problem was there was no taurine in the food because there was no meat in the food. So
Right.
taurine exists.
No organs.
Right. So they were literally eating gorgum and synthetic stuff that looked like meat, but there was no meat in the diet. And this was back when cats were not real popular and there wasn't a lot of cats living indoors. So they were getting wild caught prey. They were probably eating little rabbits and birds and mice and stuff.
Sense.
And so it wasn't noticed right away until people started to take these cats and live totally indoors with them. Now they're not out foraging and getting any meat. And all of a sudden we're seeing an epidemic of cardiomyopathy. And it was literally because there was no meat in their diet. So now they go and they add synthetic taurine to the diet and they go, "Look, we fixed it." Meanwhile, this high carbohydrate, enzymatically dead processed food loaded with synthetic vitamins and chemical preservatives is still being fed to the cat.
It's
And
wild.
horrid. So the number one cause of death in cats still is kidney disease. Cancer is right behind it, but right now it's still kidney disease. And it's because of two things. One, this high carbohydrate diet. But then the second problem is that cats came from the desert. So they were biologically designed to have a low water intake, and they were designed to get most of their water from their diet. Well, what are we made up? We're 70% water. When they ate a mouse or a rabbit, it was 70% water. So in the desert, you don't have to go find a ton more water to make up that extra little deficit. And a lot of people find it amazing that their cats, they don't understand why the cat takes its paw and puts it into the water and moves it before it drinks it, or it's so attracted to the faucet when the water is coming out. It's because instinctually they know that moving water is safe water, where stagnant water can have all kinds of nasty stuff that can kill you. And so they instinctually knew that. So for us cat owners, we understand the principles of make sure it's moving water because it attracts them to drink more. But the most important part is they need to eat a diet that is 70% water, which means it's a unprocessed, actual meat-based diet. Like they're supposed to eat another animal in the state that they killed it in. And we need to get as close back to that as possible. Where dogs are also carnivores, but we call them scavenger carnivores because they have been adapted to eating man's waste and garbage for a lot longer. So they still don't thrive on high carbohydrates, but they can adapt a little bit better than the cats do.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so glad we started with this nutrition piece because, as you know, it's so important. It's probably the most important thing that we could be talking about when it comes to our pets' health.
Yeah.
And, you know, just like it always blows my mind of how we even got to this place where we're at. We're feeding pets this like highly processed food out of a bag that just sits on a shelf and is, like you said, enzymatically dead. It's so normalized. And unfortunately, it's normalized for people too to be eating highly processed preserved food that never goes bad. And so I am always trying to let my pet owners know that it's this place we're in where it's normal and normalized to feed those types of foods. This is not normal. And it's the dry foods were created for human convenience. It has really nothing to do with what the cats especially are actually needing to consume.
You know, that's an interesting point that you brought up because the reason I ended up creating my own raw food company was because I was approaching these other companies that were already producing raw food, but it was still using genetically modified ingredients and they were adding synthetic vitamins. And so for my cancer patients, I do mostly cancer, they couldn't afford one more drop of toxin. So I approached these companies and I said, look, we really need to have what I would call a truly sustainable, clean diet. So would you be willing to make that? We'll label the organic, we'll just make it a separate SKU and you can keep your other SKUs, but just let's make one that I could direct my clients to. And they said, Dr. Siegel, we really appreciate that you're so passionate and you move more raw food for our company. I won't mention the name than anybody else, but we're moving in a different direction. And I went, oh, really? What direction is that? Mine's healthier pets. And the guy didn't answer me. He was a brand new CEO of the company. And he didn't answer me. 3 months later, they launched a kibble coated raw. Yeah. So they sprinkle raw on a kibble. And then because their company had a reputation of being a raw food company, that people didn't realize it's still a kibble underneath that little powder layer of raw. And they just didn't get it. So
we really have to be careful in discerning about, looking at the product and thinking about it. What are we actually buying and feeding and not just trusting the wording on the package?
Absolutely. So a point that I really want to bring up, because again, people are looking at the package and they don't know how to read the label. So the first thing you need is to know that there's meat, fat, bone, and organ meat in that diet. And that meat needs to be grass-fed, grass-finished. And that's extremely important to be grass-finished because a grass-fed animal, at least in the US, we can label that if that animal went out into a pasture for a day. And then that's grass-fed. They spent the rest of their life in a barn and get fed
feedlot,
modified corn, but it was grass-fed. So if it's grass-fed, grass-finished, it means it never ate that feedlot animal stuff that they feed to these animals. And so that's really, really important. Grass-fed, grass-finished. And then the other part is, what are they adding as the complete and balance? And this was another thing I learned when I was in the process of making my own product, was that according to the AFCO standards, which is a non-licensed group of big box companies, Purina and Hill. So these big box companies come together and they go, oh, we're going to tell you what we recommend should be on a label in order to be complete and balanced. And so now we have the hen house being watched by the fox, and they don't care if it's processed. They don't care that there's a ton of carbohydrates. They don't care that the vitamins that they're putting in there are synthetic.
Yeah.
But
it takes its toll on the body, the kidneys.
Absolutely. But they're saying, okay, now look, it's balanced. It has all the nutrients you need. But it's not
like eating, it's like Cheerios and other, breakfast cereals and stuff. They're like, oh, it's a complete cereal. It has we took the flour, we bleached it and destroyed it, and then we added back in the nutrients so that. Anyway, I'm sure you and I could go on a rant about.
So what I did, it's because when I went to do the packaging, I couldn't label my food as complete and balanced because I didn't add anything to it. It was the meat, fat, bone, and organ meat. So I said, okay, how do we get around this? And little download says, well, don't call it complete and balanced, and just sell your vitamins, minerals, and fatty acids separately. Because even when they put fatty acids, they usually use a fish oil. Well, as soon as it's exposed to air, it starts to turn rancid. So now you're eating a rancid fatty acid with synthetic vitamins plus your minerals, and they're expecting a 5-pound Chihuahua to get the same balance of nutrients as a 100-pound Great Dane. Now think about that. How do we know how much each one is getting? Are they equally distributed in there? No. So I thought, okay, here's a better solution. I create the macronutrients, the meat, fat, bone, and organ meat. And then separately, I created the vitamins, minerals, and fatty acids that are of the highest quality, all organic. And now they're dosed based on biological need and body weight. And the owner makes it at home, puts it together at home and gives it to the animal. And now we know what they got. And there's no guessing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So the reason they use synthetics, one, it's way cheaper, but two, it doesn't break down in the food, where when you put natural ingredients in there and that product is put together in a container, it's reacting. So you really don't know what you're getting on the other end.
Totally. So many good points.
Yes. And I think we're in a time where our food is nutrient depleted, period. It is. And there's no question about that. So because we don't know what the soil quality is. It hasn't been, our soils are not regenerative farming soils. So they are depleted soils, which means whatever's going on is depleted and blah, blah, blah. So we do need to get those nutrients. But here again, I want to help people understand that we're really looking for the essential nutrients. And let's define what an essential nutrient is. It is those nutrients that the body cannot manufacture in sufficient quantities on its own. So there are specific amino acids, vitamins, minerals, and fatty acids that are essential. So we have to make sure that they are given to the animal, but they need to be in a high quality, organic, biologically available form based on body weight and nutritional need. So that was number one.
Totally. Such great info. And I think one other thing on the topic of diet too, just to circle back with the kibble and the water thing, is you'll be amazed to see how big of a difference it is between a cat that is fed kibble and a cat that's fed a moist, fresh diet or even canned food. They don't drink water. When they're eating kibble, hopefully they're drinking a lot of water, but a normal cat doesn't need to be at the water bowl all the time, right? Because they should be getting it from their food. So just keep that in mind, that your cat and your dog are not going to be drinking the same amount of water, and they don't need the same exact food. It's different for each species.
Absolutely. Well, let's touch on water real quick. Now I could spend hours talking about water, but the water that's in our bodies, that's in the plants, is not the tap water coming out of the sink. It's structured water, and it actually has a different molecular composition than the H2O that's coming out of the sink. And that's why when we cut ourselves, we may bleed if you hit a vessel, but if you just cut your tissue, it doesn't just start pouring water out because it's in the form of a gel. So it's very important that we don't feed our animals tap water. One, it's loaded with chemicals and heavy metals and glyphosate and just off the charts with all these toxins, and it's unstructured. So the body, when it's drinking unstructured water, has to then take metabolic energy to restructure that water so that it can actually fit into the cell, because each cell has a little aquaporin, it's a little hole. And the water molecule, when it's structured, fits into that hole like a little keychain. But when it's not structured, the molecules can be too large. And so you're drinking, or your cat's drinking, and it still stays metabolically dehydrated, cellular wise is dehydrated. And that's where the damage occurs. So can I do one more thing on water and the composition? Okay. So everybody imagine that you have a cup of water and then you have a swimming pool. If I took the same amount of toxin and I put it into the cup of water that I put into the swimming pool, which would be more toxic? The cup of water where it's more concentrated, or the swimming pool where it's more diluted? Obviously, it's the cup of water. So that's what your cat's body looks like, is a cup of water. It's already dehydrated. When they're eating kibble, they're even more dehydrated. And then when those toxins come in, they become so much more concentrated and damaging to the renal tubules and to the whole complex of the kidney. And that's where we get into problems, where when we can have them have proper dilution, then the toxins aren't as damaging and they can flow out.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And yeah, I'm happy that we're addressing this major health concern of kidney issues, because, it's this leading cause of mortality in cats. And it often feels in the conventional medical world like, there's nothing to do. You just wait until your cat gets old and gets kidney disease, and then you put them on the KD kibble and give them sub-Q fluids, and that's it. So what proactive measures can pet parents and vets take to mitigate this risk for this very common disease in their cats?
So number one, feed a species appropriate diet. That is going to be, in my opinion, it's almost always a raw diet. And we can talk about how to get them converted over to that when they've been addicted to these kibbles where they're literally laced with things that make it addictive. But start with a species appropriate diet with the right amount of essential nutrients, and then plenty of clean, fresh, structured water. And those would be the two leading things. And then minimizing other toxin exposure. So the chemicals that you're cleaning in your house, what you're doing your laundry in, what you're putting on the pet, or those, anything that has estrogens and hormone disruptors and chemicals that have to absorb.
Even things you put on yourself and then you pet your animal.
Exactly. Yeah. Or the shampoos that you're using. We have to learn to read labels. We have to learn to cut the toxins out of their bodies, because that's truly killing them. Yeah. And then of course, you want to look at the electromagnetic frequencies. That's another really big area. I had an incident where I have solar on my house, and the electric company wanted to change me to a smart meter, and I was really resisting, and we fought it for years. And then finally they go, okay, well, we'll take you off the solar program if you don't go on the meter. So wow. I had a Faraday cage made. I was ready. Well, 2 weeks before they were supposed to come out, unbeknownst to me, they hopped my fence and put in a smart meter. And I didn't know it was there, and I was doing a study for this electromagnetic frequency company, and I was supposed to measure my heart rate variability for 5 days and my sleep and all these factors. And then I was going to wear the pendant, and I was going to see how much I improved. Well, I was having heart arrhythmias. I was not sleeping at all. I had no deep sleep. My adrenals were shot, and I had no idea why. When they came out to put the meter in, the guy goes, "Oh, I don't understand. You already have a smart meter." Wrong one, but you have one. And I know it wasn't there because I read my meter every 30 days for the electric company.
Wow.
I put the Faraday cage on. My arrhythmias were gone in its irregular heartbeats. They were gone in less than 8 hours. But it took me 3 months of actively treating my adrenals to recover my adrenal from the adrenal fatigue. So when I tell you that these kitties that are laying on your computer, especially the ones that are still on Wi-Fi, it is horrific. So I would encourage people to get a meter and test what is your exposure, what is your router putting out, what is your laptop putting out, what is your smart appliances. You know, we've gotten duped into all of these smart appliances and they seem so wonderful, but they are so incredibly toxic. You know, and you don't see it. You don't see the electromagnetic frequency, but it's affecting you metabolically. And so for most people that are not extremely sensitive, they just start adapting to the fatigue and the poor sleep, and you know, they make excuses. Well, let me tell you something. People talk about how animals age, and it's like almost we're trained to expect it. Well, animals are living 7 years shorter than they did 20 years ago because of the level of toxicity. And people aren't aware of that. But I've been practicing for 40 years. I know how old animals used to live too.
You've seen it.
Right. And they should have been older even then. But since glyphosate came on the market about 25 years ago, and at that point, now it is everywhere. And it is one of the most powerful toxins that we're exposed to. It's in the rainwater coming down. It's in our tap water. So we test for glyphosate levels. And I think this is really kind of sad and funny at the same time, because the lab indicates normal levels of glyphosate. But stop and think about that. We never had glyphosate in our lives before 25 years ago. It's a chemical pesticide. And so why are we saying it's normal? Why are we accepting
it's
normal
just ubiquitous?
levels?
I think that's why, but it's not okay.
But it's not okay. So when I see levels that are even existing, I'm immediately working on detoxification, which is what SPA's Family Wellness Centers was all about. How do we help these animal detox? They have 6 organs of elimination, and bless them, they are so overwhelmed with all these toxins that they just can't function. So that was food and water. So we have to have structured water. Because we don't have time to discuss what that is, please contact me and I will give you tons of information on structured water and how to get it.
Perfect.
But
Thank you.
There was, and so we talked about, you know, reducing the toxic things in the house and all that. But the other area that is so important for our cats, more so than the dogs, is movement. Because most people walk their dogs, right? They take them on walks around the neighborhood, but these cats aren't moving. So there are, right? So there, and they people build these towers and they expect the cat to exercise and go up and down. No, they're going to maybe climb up there, but it's not like they're doing laps up and down to get the cardiovascular strength. And they're certainly not moving their lymphatics, because like us, their lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. So they have to move in order for those lymphatics to be circulating. And for most indoor cats, they're laying around the house. They get up, they walk to the bowl. Maybe they play with a toy periodically. There are a few cats that still play with toys, but for the most part, they're just laying around. And their lymphatic congestion gets worse. Then we spay or neuter. Now we cut through their lymphatic drainage areas and we don't repair them because most people don't know how to. And so we get lymphatic stagnation, the liver gets stagnant. I'm going to teach this to the pet parents. Always ask to see the blood work for your animal and ask to see what the liver enzymes are. It'll be listed on the lab as ALT. And they have now shifted the labs to normal being all the way down to 18. Well, what we're measuring in liver enzymes is the turnover of the cell. There's an enzyme that lives in the liver cell, and when that cell dies or busts open, it releases this enzyme. So that's how we're measuring it. And through standard day-to-day living, there's a certain number of liver cells that are going to get used up, they're going to die, and then they're going to get replaced. So I know from when I started practicing 40 years ago, normal liver enzymes were 45 to 90. Now I'm looking at liver enzymes that are dropping, and the labs are shifting the bell curve of normal lower and lower because they're shifting it as a bell curve. Never mind that they're shifting a more sick population. I don't want to be compared to the sick population. I want to be compared to a healthy population. That's my benchmark. But they're using averages as we move forward in time, and these animals are sicker and sicker. We're seeing cancer rates in dogs at 1 out of 1.65 and cats 1 out of 3. And I think that's highly underreported.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So all these lifestyle factors are all contributing to why are our cats not thriving. And that's the other point I want to make, is that we have been accustomed to thinking that surviving, which is a adaptive response when things aren't ideal, that's living. It's not living. Thriving is that state where you have energy and vibrance and you have longevity and you're living a long productive life. That's
Yeah.
thriving, and that's what we came to Earth School to do. But most people and most animals are surviving because the conditions have become so poor that they can't really do a good job. And this survival mechanism was important when we were in the caveman days, because if you didn't have enough food or you had such extreme temperatures, they're called hormetic stressors. They would create an adaptive response in the body, but of course, these conditions didn't last forever. Eventually, it was fall and summer and food was growing again. And so you weren't starving the whole time, or you were able to move because, of course, now you have to go hunt your food and you have to gather and stuff. So there was a lot of movement. And then the extremes in temperatures was also really important. So I think it's funny that we're moving back into saunas and cold plunge.
Cold plunge.
Yeah. And we're doing cold plunging for our pets as well, because of the adaptive response. When we talk about the hormetic stressors are lack of nutrition, lack of calories, extreme temperatures, and movement, extreme movement, like high intensity movement. Those are the three hormetic stressors. Well, out in the wild, they do all three of those naturally, because they don't catch a meal every time they're hungry.
They're fasting.
Them. Right. So they do intermittent fasting, not by choice, but because they weren't a good hunter.
Yeah, that's how it is.
And of course, the extreme temperatures, they don't experience that anymore because they're in our houses, which are climate controlled. And we aren't experiencing it either. And then, of course, movement is the other one. They're not having to go out and hunt for their food and tackle it and wrestle it and capture it. They walk over to the bowl, and people think this is normal. They leave the food in the bowl the whole time. This is another cat tip. And the animal just grazes all day long. But metabolically, they weren't designed to eat all day long. They were designed to gorge at dawn and gorge at dusk if they were lucky enough to catch a meal. And then they had a fasting period in between. And it's that fasting period that allowed them to effectively digest and utilize those nutrients. But when you're eating all day long, you never allow that body to do its metabolic function. And what's worse, it's a ton of sugar because it's all carbohydrates.
Yeah, you're on that glucose roller coaster all day, just like people eating potato chips and snacks throughout the day.
Insulin spike, insulin spike, insulin spike. And that's what leads to cancer and any degenerative disease. I know when I first started practicing, we didn't see cats with arthritis. Now it's off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think people realize that, and I didn't, for a long time until I learned about it, that when you eat carbohydrates or sugar and your blood sugar spikes, that causes inflammation in the body. And so our diets, the modern diets of high carb and high sugar, it's putting our bodies through this extreme stress all day. And those periods of fasting are actually when your body is supposed to be, doing the cleanup crew and just like emptying out and resetting everything to prepare so that it's ready to go, because eating is actually a huge stress on your metabolism because of all the work that has to be done to control your blood sugar and assimilate the nutrients. So, it's not normal for any of us to have an all-day buffet, especially high carb foods. And so one of my first simple things I always try to encourage cat parents who are doing free choice kibble is just, number one, try to get them off the kibble. And number two, try to switch to meals instead of free feeding.
Twice a day. Absolutely.
Yeah. But you said you have a tip for trying to get cats into a raw diet or off of a kibble diet.
Well, actually, step number one is feed them twice a day. All day long. And that's step number one, is just get them used to not going over to the bowl all day long. And they'll look at it and they'll go back and they'll look at it and they'll go back. But, they're only going to get
tough love.
And as long as they're still eating those twice a day, because we know cats can get amyloidosis or they get fatty liver disease if they get starved longer than 24 to 48 hours. So we're not trying to put them on a fast. What we are trying to do is get them more metabolically less resistant and more adaptable, and
more resilient.
and get better at eating twice a day, so they have that fasting in between. So that's step number one. And then I like using freeze-dried raw as a especially for animals that they're used to a kibble diet, because the freeze-dried raw has more of that texture that they're used to, and it's drier.
Totally.
So I don't recommend feeding it dry long term, but just in that transition period. So sometimes I'll even just take some freeze-dried raw and tell the owners to sprinkle that in the bowl, because at first they look at it and they don't really know what it is, and so they walk away from it. If they eat it, that's great, you're home free. But if they're just looking at it, but they're hungry, but they're not sure, then eventually they'll start tasting it. And once they start eating it, then you can immediately reduce the amount of kibble that you're giving them. And then you start to hydrate the raw, because again, they're supposed to get 70% of their moisture is supposed to come from their diet. But step number one absolutely is stop feeding them all day long.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it can, we both, I'm sure, have a lot of compassion for our pet owners and cat owners who struggle with their picky cats. So I don't want anyone to feel bad if you have a hard time with this, but definitely reach out to a vet for support, because there are holistic vets like me and Dr. Marlene who, are out here to try to support you guys through that type of process. It can be very challenging, and don't get discouraged just because the first few times you try to start switching up your cat's diet, it may be unsuccessful, and that's just cats being cats.
So a lot of times you can just take a sprinkle of your freeze-dried or a sprinkle of the raw or whatever, even lightly cooked, and put that just maybe 10% in with 10% less of what they're used to eating. So you already know what they're willing to eat. So you substitute a little bit of the new food for some of the old food. And then when they're cleaning that up, then you start increasing the new food slowly to tolerance and keep taking away the old food. And that gives them more motivation as well.
Definitely. And I think as they get used to tasting the new food within the old food, it's kind of like trying to get a kid to eat broccoli for the first time. You have to sometimes sneak it in there, and they're not always going to accept it the first time you try, but it's worth it, I think, to go on that journey with your pet of convincing them and doing it just for their health and longevity. It is worth it to see them age gracefully.
Yes. And then the other point that's really huge that goes hand in hand with that is building up the microbiome and repairing the leaky gut. So we do that at the same time. We have specific products that I would recommend. I don't want to do any labels on the show, but we have a program where we put the animal on things that are actually healing the actin filament. So I'm going to give you a visual. So imagine these are two cells, and when they're together, they're not watertight. They're very close together. There's a little membrane, and imagine little filaments that hold a connection between the left and the right cell. But when something damages those actin filaments, they get a little bit further apart. And that's what we call leaky gut. Now there's more space for something to come through. So the outside world, which is what's connected from our mouth to our anus, everything that goes down that tube, and it's one long tube, is all the outside world. And it filters, kind of like a cheesecloth, it filters what's going through the gut, so that only what's allowed to come in through the gut that is the right size that fits through that pore, the cheesecloth membrane, that comes into the body and is carried by the bloodstream to the liver, where it's then warehoused and reutilized for whatever you need it for. But when the gut lining gets damaged and there's bigger particles, then other things come through that shouldn't have come through. And then the liver sees that and it goes, oh, look, we're under attack. There's foreign invaders. And that's what mounts that cytokine storm or that inflammatory storm to kill the invader, which is what is supposed to happen when we've damaged ourselves. The problem with our modern society is that the influx of these toxins is happening every day, of every bite, of every meal, and it never stops, because we're constantly creating the damage and constantly having this influx of foreign material, so constantly having the expression of inflammation.
Yeah, it's tough times right now. You have to really work hard to be healthy, and it's the same for taking care of our pets. But luckily we have people like you who will educate all of us and help us to learn, because there's always things that you can do. We don't want to get overwhelmed by the gravity of the whole situation, because there is a lot of things to worry about these days with our health. But these tips that you've given us are so helpful. And I think that a lot of the cat owners are going to be very successful with implementing some of these.
A lot of times, and you actually said it, you said, it could be overwhelming and it could be difficult, but only if we carry the mindset that it's challenging. But we have a choice on how to perceive the world that we're in and our motivation for making changes. So I admit I've been doing this for over 40 plus years, even changing my own lifestyle. And it's not what I do, it's who I am. And I want to encourage people to take a different perspective. You can choose to look at things as being challenging and difficult and expensive. And, you can have all these negative, low frequency words to associate with it. Or you can choose this to be fun and exciting and rewarding and a new adventure to look forward to, because nobody looks forward to their animals getting sick and dying early, and nobody looks forward to their own health being compromised. So what can we do about it? And can we embrace it with the joy and the gratitude that we have an opportunity to make change? That's amazing. Like, where in the history of the world did we have such access to information that we do now? So let's have a paradigm shift and let's look at these opportunities not as traumatic and stressful, but as a joyful opportunity, the greatest blessing. Most of my friends are in the integrative human side of medicine, and we hear over and over and over again from people who have had cancer and recover that it was the greatest blessing in their life, because it motivated them to make changes about how they thought, their lifestyle, their actions, the epigenetics of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And they say now their life is so amazing, and it wasn't before. So there's our paradigm shift. Look at your situation and decide. It's a conscious decision. Am I going to embrace the cool, wonderful blessings that this opportunity is bringing me? Say yes.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, the mindset stuff is so important, and it's so key for all of us, for ourselves, for our families, and our fur babies. So thank you again for making that final point. I love that so much.
You're welcome.
So where can our audience find you to get more of this awesome content from you? Because I know they're going to want more.
Marlenesiegel.com is the hub. And from there is the educational center. It's our store. It's our products. It's our Instagram, Facebook. I'm very, very active in publishing lots of great content. YouTube has a lot of my talks are actually on YouTube that I've done. So lots of information out there. And then for those pet parents who are really inspired and they want to join for the journey and really have us assist you and hold your hand and guide you, then our pet parent course would be for you. And then I have courses for veterinarians so that they can learn the next level as well.
That's so great. And I hope that everyone is able to go check out her website and all of these amazing offerings and learn some more things so that you and your pets can continue to thrive.
We can make a difference. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So anyone listening, please go ahead and follow, subscribe, and leave reviews for the show. If you found this interview interesting, this can help us to reach more pet owners who might also benefit from this information and help us spread the good info throughout the world. So thank you again, Dr. Marlene.
You're welcome.
Pleasure having you.
Everybody.